We have had so much rain here that I feel I have to make a rain cloud pendant. So I'm starting off by making a little circle using my round nose pliers at the end of the 0.8 wire. And I'm creating a spiral around that little circle. And that's how I start making these clouds, with a spiral. So I start with a spiral, and then I'm going to start shaping the sort of puffy bits of the cloud. So I'm going round, and then I'm going to grip it with the tips of my chain nose pliers and pinch, just pinch it where it meets, and then grip it where I've pinched it and create the next puff of the cloud. So you bring it round into a sort of rounded half circle, then another bit pinched again to create the next puffy bit. So usually I do about 3 puffy bits up one side of the cloud and then bring the wire around to form the other side of the cloud. And you just use your fingers, or you can use a cylindrical mandrel to create these rounded sort of shapes of the cloud that you want, the frame that you want to make. I mean, if you want to draw the shape on a piece of paper first and then use that as a template to move your wire around, by all means do that. I quite like just doing this freestyle because it means that every time I make it, it comes out slightly different, which I like. I like the uniqueness of each piece. But feel free, because it's the first time you do it, to draw this shape out and then use that as a template. So I've cut it off just where I want the wire to meet the spiral, and I've left just enough to create a little hook. So I turn it round, create that hook, and then that hook feeds in to the side of the spiral, and then I'll use my flat nose pliers to squish and squash it down, and that will secure and complete the cloud frame. So you can sort of adjust it a bit once you've done it, but I always do start with that spiral and then do the loopy bits around that. So once you're happy with the frame, put it on your steel block and only hammer the rounded ends. Do not hammer where those joins or the double bits of the wire are, because otherwise you'll misshape the whole thing. So grip those, keep those unhammered, just the tops of the rounded areas. And you can make a much smaller one. You don't have to make it as big as I have. The reason I've made a bigger one, it's easier for you to see for the tutorial. You will also need some drop beads for the raindrops. And I'm going to be using 0.4 next to fill in the inner part of the frame. So I'm just looping half of the wire around. I've connected it to one side of the frame and just going round and round and making sort of loopy loops, and then connecting it to the other side of the frame. And I'm going to continue doing this sort of random loopy scribble within the frame of the cloud. You don't have to fill it in. I mean, when you wear it, and if it's hanging against you know, a garment which has colour, that will also, you know, fill in the this middle part of the cloud, and you've just got the outline. But I quite like doing this scribble effect, which gives it a filler and also makes it more of a tougher piece because it's got more body to it. So you work one side of the 0.4 wire and then finish it off on any side of the frame that it lands, and then use the other side, and you just keep going, and you might need 2 or 3 pieces of this 0.4 wire to do this sort of very random loopy scribble. I mean, you can weave in however you want to. Here's one I did earlier, and you can see how it looks. So once you've filled in as best you can, put it back on your steel block and use the nylon head of your whammer hammer to hammer all of that inner scribbled wire, because what that will do is compress it all together as one, and it will work harden it, and it'll be much firmer. And then I use the steel head and sort of push from the back of the piece, push it out, so that gives it a bit more shape, and it work hardens it, and it sort of burnishes it basically. So now I've got a solid framework for the cloud, and the next thing is to hang the little drops. See, this is the smaller one. I don't need to put any filler in the smaller one because it's so small. So for the little droplets, you can take these lovely little teardrop crystals, whatever you have to hand. I mean, it can be beads, and you can make little lines of beads, but they are top drilled, so I'm using 0.6 wire and going through the top drilled holes, and I'm centering one of the wires, which is the longer wire, and then I'm going to grip it at the top of the bead and use the short end to wrap around the longer end to secure it. So that's just to hold that wire in place. So this is, I'm using 0.6 because the drill hole of the top of these crystals is quite small, so 0.6. So that's now secure on there. Now you can hang it just like that, put a little bead on top, or you could get another piece of wire. In fact, I'll work from the spool. This is the 0.4 millimeter, the thinner wire that you use for the binding. And you could choose to wrap around the top of these teardrop crystals, just to give it an extra little finish, like a bead cap. But that is totally up to you. It's totally optional, and you can choose to do that. It just gives it, I suppose, a little bit of an extra finish because it adds a little bit more silver, a little bit more detail to the piece. So I'm going to cut the other end off and neaten any end that's poking out. And I'll probably do that to the 3 beads. I mean, you could just have 1 drop bead, just like 1 drop of rain coming from the cloud, but I've chosen to do 3. So everything is optional, it's just giving you ideas. So here are my 3. I'm choosing to add another little top bead, just gives it another little bit of sparkle, I suppose, and another bit of detail. So I'm adding these little faceted crystals. I'm going to make the middle one a bit longer, so I've added 2 beads to that one instead of 1. And then I'm going to create a loop at the top that crosses over, but I'm not going to wrap it yet. I'm first of all going to just open it sideways and feed it into the center of my pendant. And then I will wire wrap it. So it's a wire wrap loop, but I'll do it directly hanging from the pendant. Now, of course, again, you could just make top links on your teardrop beads and then use jump rings to suspend them from the framework of the cloud. I'm doing this directly onto the frame because it means it's extra secure for one thing, and also it doesn't make it too long, because otherwise you've got, another jump ring which will make it a little bit sort of longer. It'll hang even further down. So for the side ones, doing exactly the same thing, making a sort of loop, but I don't close it. I push it through where I want it to hang, and it sits in the space. I hold it where it crosses over, get my chain nose pliers and wrap just under the loop and between the bead and the loop, really. A couple of times, cut off any excess and make sure that I have squished down the end so there's no pokey out bit, no spike or nothing to scratch. I'm going to finish with the third one just to complete it. And then for the top, I found another bead I could use for the top, and I'm going to do the same thing to suspend it from the center part, the middle of the top of the frame. So same thing that I've just done. Make a big loop, hold it, grip it where it meets, wrap around the little tail end, squish that all down so that you've got no excess scratchy wire sticking out. So that's completely secure there, can't open up, can't fall off. Feed my top bead on. And again, you can just make a loop, but I'm choosing this time to hammer. So I hold the bead out of the way, just hammer a little area just above the bead to spread the wire so it becomes flat like ribbon. The wire becomes flat and spread out. Can you see that's flattened out? It's not round anymore, just that tiny area. And that's where I'm going to make my bail. And the reason I'm doing that, it just looks different to the round wire. It gives it a sort of, well, proper bail look, I suppose. Using my bail makers, making the top loop there, and then that is where I'm going to suspend my chain or my cord, whatever I want to suspend it from. I mean, it might just be an ornament. You could put it on a jump ring, you could hang it from, I don't know, in a window or something. You could put it on a card. You could use it actually on a card that says, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. What about that? Anyway, now I'm just finishing off that end, making sure it's nice and neat. And there's my top bail. Make sure it sits in the right position so it's not angled. So there's always a few adjustments to do right at the end to make sure you're completely happy with your piece. And that's how it looks, ready to be worn or to be used as a decoration. So have fun making your own. As you can see, they look quite good for pendants. And I've got a few other ones that I've made as decorations for the wall. I've made them big, I've made them small, and I've also glued little diamantes, or here, this one, I did glue a little flat back crystal to the center of the spiral. So if you want to do that, that gives it another little finish. So thank you for watching, and do feel you can ask for a request of a tutorial. I look forward to hearing from you. Many thanks for watching.